It's Wednesday, and we're rolling right through, as we always do. Back tonight, and this is going to be very interesting, to put it mildly. I hope you were with us Monday night, and you got to hear Tony Ghepardo talking about his book, We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. We have much more information to cover tonight, but that is in the archives. Phenomenal program. And we're talking about the issue of GMOs. GMOs are much worse than you know, unless you were listening Monday night, and we hadn't finished the story when we ran out of time. And Tony was very kind to come back this evening, and we're going to finish much more of the agenda. We'll keep going as long as needed to get it all out there. I have a feeling that Tony has several books in it, not just the new one, We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. This is an exposure about Tony's life to GMO sweet corn from an illegal covert field trial, they call it, in Michigan back in 1993, which led to his health taking a nosedive. He then learned about GMOs as opposed to organic food in 2013. By attempting to go exclusively organic, Tony was able to regain some of his lost health. His brain fog has cleared. His sleep apnea has recovered from catastrophic to severe, but he still has these things called sundowners. They have not improved. In other words, by 5 o'clock every day, he's clumsy, exhausted, mentally bereft, and so forth. He doesn't dare drive after 3 o'clock in the afternoon because of the danger of falling asleep at the wheel. Tony, are you there? And welcome back.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here again.
Glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
Sure. Monday, we got into some very fascinating areas that I'd love to pursue maybe in other programs sometime in the future, but we want to get back to the GMO thing, I think, in this hour. Tell people why they need to read this book. We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. And you did explain why you wrote the book, and you obviously are a fierce researcher. Let me just make an overlay here. The idea of genetic modification of things we eat that our bodies are not used to, not prepared to handle, don't know how to handle, and the resultant poisonings and toxic reactions are really off the chart. Nobody even knows how to track them all because everyone's different. But this GMO is a weapon. It is a weapon against humanity. This is genocide. This is a slow burn genocide, maybe faster in some cases, but it is not designed to prolong our lives or improve the quality of life as we know it. It's an evil, ugly, dark, satanic device. Genetic modification of foods and other things as well. So, Tony, I'll leave you right there, and let's go.
Okay. Well, when you first started to describe that here, you said how it's a poison against humans that our bodies are not used to. In the research that I include in this book, the word xenobiotic keeps reappearing. And xenobiotic is a chemical compound foreign to a given biological system. Now, anything that is genetically engineered, therefore, would be xenobiotic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so all genetically engineered everything is going to be contrary to existing life on planet Earth. So even though the genetic engineers talk about a target, target organism.
Like corn, okay. They're going after, yeah, okay.
Okay, so they've got the target organism, and it's corn, and they're focused on that. Unfortunately, the biological agents that they're using do not stop at simply the corn. They branch out into everything. So it's not just human life that's being exposed and endangered here. It's pretty much all life will be threatened and changed by gene-spliced agents. Mm-hmm. So it's really a pandemic weapon. I mean, it will attack everything eventually.
This is what it is. It's is it not an extinction-level weapon?
Yes, it will kill everything, but it will take time. Now, for an example, they had the glyphosate that was supposed to kill the weeds, and after 20 years, the weeds have adapted to it.
Yep.
So now you've got super weeds.
Yep.
So, okay, what their next solution to that is, well, we'll double up. So instead of gene splicing only glyphosate, which everybody associates that with Roundup, not only are we going to gene splice glyphosate into our food crops like corn and soy, we're going to add to that 2,4-D. And 2,4-D is a weed killer from the 1940s. Right. So now, instead of having just one weed killer in your food, you're going to have the two of them at once.
Oh, God. And an increased dose of glyphosate on top of that, yes?
Yeah, they boost the glyphosate. But, see, the problem here is they test the one component, glyphosate, and, of course, Roundup has all these surfactants and ancillary chemicals included in it. And the research that I've included in my book shows that they multiply the toxicity of the glyphosate. All right, so now you're going to combine two different weed killers. They have two different mechanisms. They test each one separately, and they say, well, 1 + 1 = 2, but when you're dealing with living organisms, they're synergenic. 1 + 1 = 4 generally.
Wow. So there's a interaction between the two weed killers that makes them almost double their normal potency. This is disgusting.
No. It makes it more than double.
Like 400%? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. 2,4-D, you're eating 2,4-D, you're eating glyphosate, both deadly poisons and toxins, and they work together and become both in and of themselves far more potent and toxic, all right? Now, let me say one other thing here before you go on, Tony. There's a big deal out there now, and it's called gluten intolerant. I got to have gluten-free food. Well, I found out that that's a big lie. You already know this. I found out what's really going on. And I've tried to warn people. No one's listening. But the idea is this. It's very simple. Wheat does not, on one day, all turn into the proper texture, let's call it, for harvesting. Some of it's still green. Some of it's turned white. It's ready for harvesting. When they run a harvester, a combine, through a wheat field that's still partially green, it's hard on the machinery. So what's the ideal solution? The ideal solution is to have the wheat at the proper rate of harvest all on the same day or all at the same time period, 2-3 days a week, whatever, so they can run their harvester through there. You know what they do, ladies and gentlemen, to make the wheat all the same? They douse it with glyphosate. So it's not gluten intolerance. You have a glyphosate intolerance. You're being poisoned. It's real simple, and that's the truth. Wheat farmers have admitted this. They soak their fields of wheat with Roundup, basically. We can just call it that. All right? So you have to understand that it's not the gluten. You're being poisoned, for God's sakes. Go ahead. Am I right?
Yes, I addressed that on page 151.
Very good.
Exactly what you just said. That bad practice started in Scotland back in 1980 because they were so far north, the wheat wouldn't cure in time for the end of the season for them to harvest it. So rather than to lose the crop, They went out and they sprayed the crop. They sprayed the heads of the wheat with the glyphosate. It killed the wheat, and therefore it was desiccated.
Right,
and
that's
then
what they
were
want.
able to harvest it.
Desiccation, the word cured is perfect. Yes, gotcha. All right.
Desiccation and cured is the same, yeah.
So forget this gluten thing, ladies and gentlemen. Please, don't eat wheat, commercially farmed wheat anymore. If you can find organic wheat, you got a chance. At least you won't be poisoned.
Now, I went to Monsanto's website, and they have instructions for the farmer. You know, it's a marketing thing. Here's the chemical, and here's how good it is. Here's what it does for you. And their instructions for spraying, not just wheat, they name several crops, to cure them for easier harvest or more economic harvest. The wheat, for instance, they say spray it 3 days before harvest. Well, now, if you're going to harvest wheat, you're not going to do it in the rain. It has to be dry. So you spray it 3 days. 3 days later, you come through and you harvest it. All that spray is on the wheat.
Oh, it's right there. It's right there. Yeah.
Yeah. They grind it up and they make food out of it. So here they've got wheat that is heirloom seed. You know, it's at the very least it's non-GMO, and then they hose it down with glyphosate 3 days before they harvest it. Now, this they call it "don't ask, don't tell" policy, where the farmers don't tell the millers, and the millers don't ask the farmers. You know, did you spray this with glyphosate before you harvested it? Now, as bad as poisoning the wheat as it's growing so that you kill the weeds, much more of the toxin is in your food when they spray it directly just before the harvest.
Oh, absolutely. Sure, they're not doing it a month before to kill the weeds off. It's 3 days before they harvest.
Yeah.
Now, think about this, everyone. Uses of wheat. Wheat is a remarkably diverse food crop. Flour. Most flour is made directly from the wheat grain. Breads, that means, of course, all bread, pastry, cookies, crackers, baked goods, which a lot of those have, of course, aspartame in them. Pastries, pasta, Italians, okay, all of us who are Italian. Pasta, pizza, breaded and battered foods, cereals, canned soups. Okay, there's a whole long list of things with this deadly toxic wheat in it. And it doesn't go away. And Tony's point is they're harvesting this wheat with fresh applications of glyphosate and now 2,4-D.
Right.
Go ahead, please.
If we don't get back to the 2,4-D, I do want to mention Dioxin. When they made 2,4-D back in the 1940s, the process that they used, a byproduct that they could not or did not bother to sort out was dioxin, which dioxin is the deadliest component of Agent Orange, the defoliant that they used in Vietnam.
Right.
What they're claiming today is today's manufacturing process, they almost eliminate the dioxin in it. So Enlist Duo, which is the GMO foods that have both glyphosate and 2,4-D in them.
And the GMO part of the food. You got three strikes right there.
Okay, to make a GMO corn called Enlist Duo. Enlist Duo, I believe, is corn and also soy. They will branch out into others, but what is currently on the market, or by now it's on the market, is Enlist Duo corn and Enlist Duo soy. All right, those Enlist Duo, they've gene spliced glyphosate into it and 2,4-D into it. And of course, the 2,4-D today is almost free of dioxin. So there's a third and extremely deadly chemical, dioxin, which is
nobody talks about dioxin anymore. It's hardly mentioned. You're so right. It's crucial. That's a bad one.
Okay, so I mean, in their testing and in their reports and everything, they're saying, well, we've got two things here: glyphosate and 2,4-D, and a third element that they're not mentioning is dioxin. Now, the public is confused because the manufacturers want them to be confused. So they're saying, oh, no, this is safe, and the opponents have scrutinized dioxin, and they're saying, because dioxin, there's nothing that they can say that overstates how dangerous it is, okay? And the industry turns around and says, well, today's methods, we can almost eliminate dioxin from our manufacturing methods.
Almost.
Yeah, well, almost
how comforting.
Isn't good enough.
No.
And anyway, in the book here, I tell how there was no American data available, but the Canadians did have data. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, this process is pretty good, and you know, like, I don't know, 7 parts per million. But then these other processes are more and more contaminated. So you get some honest information out of the Canadians and just measurable levels of dioxin in the different types of manufacturing of the 2,4-D chemical. So there's not one answer. You have to know the method they made the chemical in to know the pollution level, the contamination level of dioxin. And of course, that's not going to appear on the label.
Never.
All right. So you see how confusing that is.
Look, you can look up dioxin if you want to, and I urge all of you to do that. Just look up Dioxin, dioxin. There are stories like this: mortality in a population exposed to dioxin after 20 years. Health effects of dioxin exposure, a mortality study. Dioxin studied to death. Death by dioxin. You've got to read these things. You have to understand that you are up against an industry that doesn't care about human life, your health, or anything but the dollar, and what's worse, they're following an agenda. We'll get there. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I've got a paragraph on page 117, dioxin contamination, where I'm quoting Extension Toxicology Network. But I don't dwell on dioxin because basically the public doesn't even know what it is. And what I try to focus on is the things that the industry is telling us. Well, we put glyphosate in there. We got 2,4-D. Atrazine. Atrazine dates back to 1959. And all the happy reports that the company, when they came out with all these chemicals, 2,4-D back in the 40s, atrazine in the late 50s, glyphosate in the mid-70s, the company comes up with the chemical, they do the research, and they tell the government, oh, this is safe, we're good. And so the government looks at that, and they call it GRAS, capital, they're all caps, GRAS, generally recognized as safe. And so I address this with atrazine. on page 119, I describe atrazine where, at the time, the late 50s, this is safe, you can use it, and it's not going to be a problem. And we've used it for decades. Now, there's two things going on here. The patent lasts 20 years, and I guess outside research has a problem researching these things because they're proprietary for the first 20 years. So the company has a license to poison you for 20 years without question.
No review, no oversight, nothing. They got a ticket to ride.
Yeah.
To take you to the funeral home for 20 years. Wow.
Carte blanche, yeah. And, now, back in the 70s, I did research back then, and I went to the New England Journal of Medicine and journals like that, and they didn't name the companies, they didn't name the chemicals. They said anionic herbicides, anionic pesticides. And back then there weren't that many, so you kind of knew what they were talking about to begin with. And they were talking about all these problems with atrazine. It didn't slow anybody down. It was a popular farm chemical because it was generally recognized as safe.
Boy, that makes me feel much better. Generally recognized it as safe. I guess that means somebody eats something and they don't fall over dead, so it's generally recognized as safe. That's science? No, that's not science. That's folklore. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's superstition. So now I published Canary, a couple of years ago, and I wasn't finding a lot of good scientific research to put into the book. Well, that's why I republished it with a different title, because it's a different book. I found a lot of scientific study in the last 2 years, and all of a sudden there's availability of research done specifically on atrazine, and it tells how a male frog is turned into a female frog with multiple reproductive organs, and they all function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's because these weed killers and these insecticides are, if you look at the molecules, they're very close to natural
estrogen, right?
Hormones.
They're estrogenic.
4 different female hormones, and not just estrogen, proestrogen, and I at the moment I don't.
So there are 4 of them that are involved in this. Completely.
There's 4 different hormones. Now, in the current research, they only name 2 or 3. Growth hormone would be the third one.
HGH?
But the research I did.
HGH.
Okay.
Human growth hormone. All right.
Yeah, but also plant auxin. See, 2,4-D is a plant growth hormone. It's an auxin. But the research I did back in the early 70s, there was a 4th hormone. And they're not exactly hormones. Geometrically they're very close. But to use a British description, they're one off. All right, so they're cheap counterfeits. And so when your body uses these things, they're xenobiotic, and if like glyphosate. Glyphosate is it's an amino acid. It's almost glycine, and a glycine is a very basic building block amino acid. Your body makes proteins using glyphosate as if it were glycine, and those proteins are unstable. Now, not being a research biologist, I would have to presume that means that it's going to cause a lot of cancer.
Right.
But, obviously it's going to cause problems because you're using unstable building blocks. But anyway, so atrazine, they've got a lot of chemical research available currently. They're coming up with a lot of glyphosate research and, to a lesser extent, 2,4-D research. Now, what they're not doing is they're not able to show the problems with the genetic manipulation itself, because that's still proprietary. And they've got their, patents. They've got patent protection, so that there are researchers, they've done great research, but they can't publish it because of patent infringement. They're afraid of being sued for patent infringement. If they've got a job someplace, they'll be fired from it. Now, my best research, and I use him quite a bit in the later chapters, is Anthony Samsel. I believe he's a doctor, Samsel, he's a researcher. Samsel and Senef have done some brilliant research, and Anthony Samsel is retired.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he can publish, because he's not afraid of being fired.
Right.
I've got several pieces of his research included in this book, and he names the myriad of diseases that these phony amino acids cause our bodies when they're ingested.
Very good. All right. The book is We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. All right. Tony Ghepardo, and it's Ghepardo. Ghepardo. Go ahead, Tony. This is so important, this material. And you've already learned, most of you, maybe some of you already knew some of this, in this first half an hour tonight, enough to save your life. That's how important this book is. It's huge. Everyone likes pasta. Okay, pizza. Look, it's all wheat. It's 2,4-D, it's glyphosate, and they synergistically push each other to far higher levels of toxicity to the human and any living creature. Think of the animals that eat crops. Go ahead, Tony.
Well, the research that I've done so far, Enlist Duo, I believe is...
Would you spell that, Tony, please?
What?
Spell that, would you please?
Enlist Duo?
ENLISTDUO.
Oh,
I want to make sure people they get a mental...
Let me double check that. Wait a minute.
Clock on it.
Yes, ENLIST, and then a second word, DUO.
Very good. Okay, now that is a variety of corn.
And I think soy also.
Okay. All right, Enlist Duo. All right. Very good.
Yeah. So they were looking to bring that to market in 2014. So, and the government expedites all these things. So that stuff has been grown for probably 2 or 3 years now, and we've probably been eating it without even knowing it.
Uh-huh.
The wheat, I am not familiar that they've made an Enlist Duo wheat seed yet, but like I say, they don't have to. It's already toxic. I have an article in here where the researcher and author of that article, he went to the food store in Binghamton, New York, and he bought a selection of foods, bread, eggs, several foods, and he bought the GMO variety, which the public considers to be normal food, and then he bought the more expensive organic food, which the public doesn't understand. Organic food is what we used to eat back in the 50s.
Yes, sir.
All right. Back then it was normal food. Well, not today. Well, it's strange food today, and, and so people are leery of the organic food. But his findings and his measurements were unhappy because the breads, even though they were organic breads and the pastries, they had glyphosate in them, and that was due to the don't ask, don't tell policy, where these farmers are surreptitiously spraying them down for easier harvest. Now, it's only in the northern climates, like in the United States, it'd be Wisconsin and Minnesota, like that, that they would use them. Now, down in say, Kansas, they wouldn't really want or need to use that because they would have a long enough growing season to easily harvest the wheat without the weather affecting them.
Got it.
But, I mean, if you're not handling these crops yourself, you don't know what they're doing to them. Now, the millers, actually, I think it named a specific milling company. They told their farmers that they can no longer accept wheat or oats that have been sprayed at harvest time, because by spraying these things and desiccating them with the glyphosate, it ruins the gluten.
Okay.
And the consistency.
That's the vital part of the nutrition in the wheat.
Yeah, but and they said they didn't do this for health reasons. They did it because it changes the consistency of it, and it makes it tougher to make the flour. I mean the flour that they make.
I understand.
The bread and everything doesn't turn out as well because it's been changed. It's been altered. In later chapters, I also tell about iodine, where, 40 years ago, grain millers, that was the company that I couldn't, and that's on page 151.
Okay.
Let's see. 40 years ago, they used to, when they made the bread, they added iodine, and I don't know why they would add that.
Well, they added iodine to salt, too. Remember that? Morton salt?
Yeah. Right. However, all this salt that they put in the food is not iodized. You read the label and it says salt added, or I don't know, like 280 grams of salt per serving or whatever.
Right.
If it were iodized salt, it would say iodized salt. So we're getting too much salt in our ready-made food, and none of it's iodized. And the stuff on your table, it's only going to be iodized if you purchase iodized salt. Now, iodine was added to the salt because Americans weren't getting enough iodine in their diet. And if you're depending only on iodized salt for your iodine, you're not going to have enough. And now, because the prepared food all has too much salt in it that is not iodized, people are not using their salt shakers anymore. So basically, their body's being starved of iodine.
Oh, yes. And tremendous epidemic of iodine deficiency. I take Iodorol, the iodine supplement. You can take way more iodine than the FDA guidelines suggest. We're just depleted completely almost.
Well, if you eat seaweed, brown kelp or dulse is what I eat. And if you eat the seaweed, you can eat as much as 400 times the recommended daily amount.
Yep.
That the government.
The other problem with that, Tony, is where you get your seaweed. If it comes from the Pacific Ocean, northern or southern, you're in trouble. Seaweed is a sponge for radiation, as you know. So
yes, I do.
You've got to be real careful.
Mine comes from the state of Maine.
Oh, they grow it inland, huh?
No.
Offshore?
Maine. It's on the coast. It's,
okay. So they got a kelp farm there. I got it.
Anyway, Yeah, so I get my seaweed from Maine, and if you eat as much as 400 times the RDA, now all of a sudden it's an adaptogen. Iodine becomes an adaptogen. It helps to correct imbalances in your endocrine system, I guess. Problems that your body has will be corrected it'll work on them if you eat a lot of iodine. Now, not having enough iodine, it's not just a thyroid problem. It's not just your thyroid that requires iodine. All of your body's systems require iodine. And there have been 2 people that I've seen their health take them right to, it just precipitated, and it took them right to the edge of being dead. They were in a waking coma, I guess. Their lethargy was so bad. They were so bereft of the ability to move for lack of energy. And I got them to eat dulse. Americans are quite squeamish about eating seaweed. But anyway, I got them to eat dulse flakes, which didn't seem to bother their sensibilities. And within a couple of weeks, it stood them both back up on their feet. So it's very dramatic what the lack of iodine does to your system. Now, 40 years ago, bread contained iodine. Now, when they took the iodine out of bread 40 years ago, they replaced it with bromine. Now, iodine goes to receptor sites. Bromine goes to those same receptor sites.
So it precludes you from uptaking it. I got it.
Right. So if the receptor sites are full of bromine, which is actually it's a toxin, the little bit of iodine you get, your body isn't able to receive it. So, it puts you in a pretty bad way. So there's more than one vector of toxin in the baked goods that you purchase. You've got the bromine, which is a toxic vector. Mm-hmm. You've got the GMO wheat, which is an unknown toxic vector. Because, like I say, I had trouble finding research on the DNA damage that GMOs do. And then there's the glyphosate vector. So you've got 3 different toxic vectors, and our science, the people that do testing simply don't test 3 things at once. They test one thing, and they keep it simple. Well, GMO poisoning, you've got so many vectors involved that even with a supercomputer, and if you knew what you were doing, and see, that's the problem. Most of these people don't actually know what they're doing. Wow. There's no way to sort it out. Now, as an engineer, I was in test engineering, and I looked around at the people around me with their conducting tests and so forth, and there's really a lack of skill in doing good testing. And companies don't want you to tell them this doesn't test good. You have to redo it. You have to re-engineer it. You have to start from scratch and manufacture it all over again. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear it passes, ship it. And so there's no premium on actually knowing how to properly test something, because the company wants to build it and ship it and make money off it, not continue to redesign it and test it again. So what I saw in electronics, obviously a similar thing is going on in the
food industry.
well, in the food industry, in the genetics industry, in the medical industry. I mean, my experience going to the doctors have a book. If you've got these symptoms,
it's a code. The code book. It's a code, medical code book.
Okay, so you got symptom this, and this. Must be, here's your problem. Or maybe you've got a choice of 2 or 3 different diseases that could be a problem, which could easily be sorted out.
Probably they don't even have books anymore, Tony. They probably just enter the symptoms into their computer, and some program somewhere spits back potential, quote, identified diseases, end quote.
If they were actually doing that, expert systems, is what you just described, expert system would be better than the doctors I have been to. All right? An expert system would be so far superior to the doctors that I have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem is that book, those expert systems, were programmed before they had GMOs. Those diseases had natural vectors. Now today, like I told you, with the example for wheat, you've got a minimum of 3 obvious vectors. Their books and their expert systems do not account for that.
They're missing so much. Wow, they're just not screening for it. They're not designed to. Things have changed.
Actually, it's hopeless. I mean, from my own testing experience, some of the things that some of my health problems, the research that I've done, I'm learning that there were 4 and 5 vectors that could have caused these problems.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to sort it out. Now, I figure I'm at least head and shoulders above my peers in engineering doing tests. Okay, and so I apply that to the medical field, and I figure I can hold my own. But when you've got 5 and 6 different vectors to come up with the same answer, it's pretty hopeless. I mean, even if you tried and you wanted to do good luck with that. Now, in my book, I say how the last honest doctor that I had talked to was a general practitioner back in 1993. 23 years later, I met a second honest doctor. And again, he was a general practitioner. Now, that GP, I was talking about GMOs, and of course, doctors poo-poo GMOs. Oh, no. Only kooks thinks there's a problem.
Right.
GMOs are safe because other doctors have said that they are, or
generally recognized as safe. Generally,
there you go. Right. Precisely. And well, my experience with the doctors I've seen is the ones that actually do know what's going on, they are afraid for their license. I mean, they went to school for a number of years and they paid a lot of money and a lot of hard work to get that ticket. And if they make waves about GMOs, the AMA is going to pull their medical license.
Right.
And so they go from a doctor, which is a big deal, they go to what? A taxi driver? I mean, what's a doctor do when they pull his license?
Right. That's right. That's
okay.
right.
So even if you've got a medical doctor that actually knows what's going on, he doesn't want to know what's going on, okay? Oh, dear. But at any rate, so this doctor, 23 years later, GP, I'm talking GMOs to him, and he was the first doctor in 23 years that didn't tell me no. he was willing to listen to what I had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And after he heard me out that, GMOs are bad and that's what's causing these problems, he said, well, I have a young daughter, and she has terrible allergies. He says, I'm a doctor, and I don't know what to do for these allergies. He says, I can't help her, and I've tried everything. I said, well, first of all, those allergies are caused by GMOs. You got to start feeding her organic food. And, going half-hearted doesn't get the job done. It's got to be everything. If it doesn't say organic on the label, you don't feed it to her, period. And that goes for spices, anything that you put in your mouth. It has to be organic. And I says, if you do that, her allergies will go away. He was skeptical. He wasn't so sure about that. Mm-hmm. I said, look, do it for a week.
Just give me a week. Right. Give me a week.
Now, everybody says, wow, organic food is so expensive. I won't do it. I won't spend that much money.
Well,
I was dying, and I had the same stupid thing going on inside my head. And then I decided, hey, I've got money to live for, I don't know, half a dozen more years. But if I die tomorrow, somebody else gets that money. So why don't I splurge and buy 4 days worth of organic food? So that's what I did. And I drove 13 miles to the organic food store, which was a harrowing, it was like climbing Mount Everest for me to get in the car and drive 13 miles because I was in such bad shape. And I got back to the house and I ate lunch. And after I ate supper, I sat there and I felt the cells in my body felt like light bulbs bursting. And it wasn't a painful sensation, but it was strange. And I realized I'm starting to feel relief. I was in so much pain, I was numb, and I just didn't know it because I'd been there for so long. And by day 2, I started feeling better enough so that I drove back to the organic food store to buy more organic food. And I didn't want to run out. And so really, I was in such bad shape. It only took me 2 days to understand things got better. Anyway, so this doctor, the second thing I told him, here is what your daughter needs. You've got to get, RFG makes an electronic scrubber, air scrubber.
Right.
You plug it into the wall. They make a room-sized unit. You plug it into the wall, and it takes electricity, and it takes the moisture out of the air, combines them, and it puts out a hydrogen peroxide mist. And that mist kills living things floating around in the air, dust particles and, particulate pollution. It, precipitates on the particle and drops it to the ground. So, in other words, it works better than a HEPA filter.
Interesting. An air scrubber.
An electronic scrubber, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I said, now, if you've got a forced air furnace,
yeah,
and of course the furnace, you'd also have air conditioning,
yeah,
with the air ducts. I said, with a unit like that, for $1,200, you could put the unit on the furnace and do the whole house.
Just put it on the return air right above the furnace. I have one. I have an air scrubber. I think it was $350, something like that. It's what it is. It's a corona discharge ozone unit.
There you go.
And we have ozone units in our sponsor portfolio here. Tony, we're out of time tonight, but what I'd like to do is invite you back next week when you feel physically well enough, maybe next Tuesday perhaps, and I want to go into the GMO agenda. Who's behind it? where you think it may be designed to take us, which is right to extinction. And we'll talk about that aspect of it. This is all in Tony's amazing book, and you can get it on Amazon. We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. Don't forget that. Does that sound like something you could do, Tony?
Beauty. Tuesday at 10?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I will be here for you Tuesday at 10.
Okay.
The reason I told you Monday I needed a day to rest up. I was worthless yesterday after staying up so late.
Well, you've recovered, done wonderfully. So you have a weekend and a couple of days, and so we'll talk to you on Tuesday, and then we'll take this to its conclusion, so to speak, and point fingers, and Tony will offer us his projections and conjecture as to who's doing it and why. And that we'll talk about on Tuesday. In the meantime, order the book, We Poisoned Our Grandchildren. Thank you, Tony, very much.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Good night.
Good night.
All right. Tony Ghepardo. And it's a remarkable material. Again, it's great to see it in the new book gathered together. Wait till you hear the punchline on Tuesday. Wow. Back with more in just a few minutes.